Today I'm going to talk about canning butter, which is kind of an oddball thing that you would not really think about canning. I actually was forwarded a TikTok video about this, so I decided to try it. The process of canning is not that much different. I'm going to be canning both in steel cans, these are 1 pound salmon cans, and in ball jars, which is what most of you guys will be canning in. I'm including these cans because back in the old Prepping 101 days at Guns America, I had sourced these can sealers, these cans, and the can sealers that seal them. I had sourced them, and I know that some of you guys bought them and you're still following the column as grid down prepping. So with butter, first we're just going to melt butter. This is 36 pounds of regular old Land O'Lakes butter. It's just a case that I was able to get at Restaurant Depot. And of course, first you're just going to melt your butter. And I'll walk you through the rest of the steps of canning, in part reminding those of you who have seen canning stuff of how to do it but haven't done it. And obviously, those of you who don't know anything about canning, I will review some of the canning stuff that I've covered in the past. So after it melts, you're going to start to see bubbles rising to the surface. See right there? And with those bubbles, as it begins to boil, it's like a scum. It's like a foam that forms on the surface. So after the whole thing boils, we're going to be removing that from the surface. That is, I don't know what it is. I've tried to research what it actually is, what part of the butter it actually is, but I haven't been able to find it. We're not making clarified butter per se. This is the process to make clarified butter. But with clarified butter, you also get rid of the milk solids, which you see are all that stuff at the bottom there. So we're not going to be getting rid of the milk solids. Just this foam, we're going to skim off the top after it's boiling. And we're not going to let it boil until the foam stops. We're not really going to do any of that stuff that you would do normally with clarified butter, because with clarified butter, you're trying to get all of the water out of the butter. We're not doing that. We're just getting rid of this, whatever this foam is. And this is literally from the TikTok video that I saw. I have been unable to find substantive information out there, except that it works. This is the second time I'm doing it. I obviously made sure it works first, and it does work really well. So I figured I'd walk you guys through the process. For those of you guys who have followed this channel especially, this is a real treat. If you're storing a lot of flour, which I've obviously suggested many times over the years, having some butter that does not need refrigeration is a pretty incredible thing. So I figured it's worth covering. Now that we're boiling, what I do is I shut the heat off. Shut off my heat source. And as you can see, I've got this thick scum of I don't know what it is. Like I said, I don't know what this is, but you do have to kind of, if you don't want to waste a lot of your butter, it's going to take you a while to do this, because it does separate right off the top pretty easy. But there's not a lot of it for 36 pounds of butter. I only have about a 1/4 of an inch of scum on the top. Once you're skimmed off, you can start filling your jars. Now, as you're filling, you want to try to keep it mixed up so that your solids are mixed with your milk fat, your butter fat. And then you're just gonna, just like you would with regular canning jars. I am not a fan of glass, so I'm only going to do a few of these. I don't can much in glass. So I try not to can anything in glass, just because I don't trust that it's going to survive whatever's coming, and it certainly can't be thrown into a backpack and, you know, any of that stuff. I'm not going to get into that really today, but it's not. You're going to leave a little bit of headspace. I try to leave with glass, I try to leave a decent amount of headspace. With all canning, I try to leave about a half an inch of headspace. But, and then with, you just put on your lid, okay? And then you're going to loosely tighten. You're going to loosely tighten your. The steel cans are a lot easier to deal with for me than glass because they're deeper and I can put a funnel down in them, and there's just a lot of reasons why the steel cans are far superior to the glass. But I'm not, until I have a source for them, I can't really preach that myself much. The cans themselves you can get from Wells Can still. It's in Canada, and it's wellscan.ca. But they're over $2 a piece now. They're really the only source for these stackable salmon cans is Wells Can. So, and they've just gotten very expensive to ship them to the U.S. I don't even know if you could honestly get them today shipped to the U.S. because of the shipping problems that are going on out there. So that's also going to be true of getting things from China. So I hate to say it, but if you can get glass ball jars and you've got a lot of flour stored and you have a canner, or you can get a canner, there are still some canners out there available on the, you know, on like the Lehman's kind of websites. I don't know if Lehman's specifically has it, but there are still some on eBay and Amazon as well. So, and any pressure canner works with canning. So I told you I'm going to review some of the canning stuff. So I'll do that while I'm filling these rather than cut out of this to be done with it. So the reason that we can to begin with is because of botulism. Okay, botulism is a really nasty disease that comes from eating spoiled food. But the spoiled food really isn't just spoiled. It has a very common bacteria in it called botulinum. And that bacteria, botulinum, is extremely robust. And it can live in temperatures above boiling. But it dies off at about 245, okay? So that's why we use a pressure canner for all of the normal kinds of not acidy food. So unless you're canning tomatoes or a very acidy fruit like mango, you're gonna pretty much need a pressure canner. And the reason is that under pressure, water boils at higher temperatures. So when we do 10 pounds of pressure, we can get boiling in the canner up to about 245, 250, which will kill the botulism bacteria. Now, I'm going to do a separate video on how you eat canned food, because the problem with the botulism bacteria is it is extremely robust, and the toxin that it produces is not as robust. The toxin actually dies at 185. So as long as you pressure can your stuff and you take precautions when you eat your canned food, usually if a can goes bad, it's going to tell you. It stinks, it swells, it's, you know, I'm going to show you some of that stuff. I found some really old cans that I had canned many years ago, and I left them outside. They were like mistake cans that I thought were going to blow up on me, and they sat in a box outside. So I am going to do a separate video in a Guns America Digest and grid down article on on opening those cans. But the nice thing about botulism toxin is that it dies at 185. So if you bring your canned food up, if you cook your canned food and you hold it at 185 for 5 minutes, even if that botulism bacteria is still in there, you're going to kill the toxin, and the toxin is what really gets people in trouble. We actually have botulinum bacteria usually in our gut. It's usually in our gut, and it's in dirt. It's extremely, very common bacteria, which is why we have to also be so careful with canning, because this botulism the botulinum bacteria is always around. So you can say, oh, what if I don't need it because I'm being careful, I'm cleaning things, and it doesn't matter. You can clean your stuff with boiling water if it's at sea level, or if it's at normal unpressurized temperature. You can wash it all you want. You can use soap on it. You can use all these things. It doesn't kill the botulinum bacteria. So we have to be super careful with canning. And I'll tell you here, and I'll tell you in the article, that my methodologies are this is what I do. I'm not in the age of everyone suing each other. I do this on my gun videos as well. I'm not instructing you. I'm just sharing with you what I'm doing, not instructing you to do any of this stuff. All right, this is what I do. Some people are really anal about their cans and washing their cans and preheating their cans and their lids, and I don't do any of that stuff. I don't have time for it. I have 7 children. I'm lucky to have time to get aside to work, because of everyone needing to be driven everywhere and needing things from me. So it's just not, I don't do any of that stuff. All right. So if you want to get really into canning, go to official canning websites, and they're going to tell you the quote right way to do all of this stuff. They won't tell you in steel cans. Steel can stuff is really hard to get a hold of, because there's just not a lot of people that are doing it in steel cans. And if you ever tried to sell your steel cans, forget it. You'll get black helicopters in your driveway, because the government does not like. In fact, LDS used to can even dry pack cans for people, and the government sued them and made a deal with them to stop doing that. That's why you have to buy the food in cans from them now. You used to be able to just go there and use their canning equipment, which was pretty cool at the time. Not anymore. And it's all because the government likes to keep very good track of who is doing canning. Okay, so now my cans are full and they're hot. So with hot pack, with steel cans, you really have to put the food in hot. I have experimented with putting the meat in cold. Doesn't work so good. In my experience, it just doesn't work so good. So if you put it in hot, it automatically kind of sucks itself closed. That's the way these cans work, is that they suck themselves closed. It creates a vacuum as they cool. And I'll show you with the glass jars, obviously, what this stuff looks like, because we will not be able to see it in our, we won't be able to see it in the steel can. I'll show you close up how this electric canner works. This canner is actually, there are some of these on eBay right now. There are some big yellow ones on eBay right now. I even saw a used one on eBay right now. But they all have an 85 millimeter chuck. And I haven't been able to find the can to that 85 millimeter chuck. I have to work on it more. This chuck was custom made for me in China for these salmon cans. This is the way a manual can sealer works. The yellow one that's out there is an automatic sealer. This is the manual version. I prefer the manual. And this less common on eBay than the yellow one. The yellow one's a little more expensive. But the 85 millimeter can, I just haven't been able to find it yet. This is a 77 millimeter lid. And I had this set made for me and for anyone else who wanted it at the time when we were ordering these from China many years ago now on my old Prepping 101 column. And the people who got it, it was a huge score, because you still can't get an Ives Way. The Ives Way can sealers are gone. The All Americans are as expensive as these guys, and they're not as easy to use. So the All American is definitely the one that's out there now, if you can get your hands on one. they work the same way. Pretty much all can sealers work exactly the same way with these two rollers. And if you want to get an All-American and you want to get some, whatever, 2-inch soup cans or whatever it is, then, you know, that's the way steel cans, that's how you do steel cans with butter. Now we're going to can our stuff, okay? And like I said, we're doing this in a pressure canner. You cannot use a pressure cooker. Pressure cooker only goes to about 5 pounds. These pressure canners go to 15 pounds, or at least 10. The thing I've read for butter is 10, but I'm using this 23-quart Presto. The Prestos have a rubber gasket, if you can see. That's what delineates them more than anything from the All-Americans, is that they have these rubber gaskets, and you just line up the arrow and close your pot like so. Okay, so this is the 23-quart Presto. There's a 16-quart that used to be at Walmart in stock in hand, but I haven't seen it for a long time. I just looked on my phone, and they do have the 16-quart for $78 at Walmart.com. This 23-quart they have for $129. So that's not off really. It was $69 before at Walmart. So it's not really that far off what the prices were, which is very, very fair in today's climate. The 23-quart, the big difference is that it's taller. It's meant for 23-quart jars, right, as opposed to 16-quart jars. I'm using steel jars, so steel jars don't. The steel cans don't really work out. I could do just as many, but it's less. It's less stuff because it doesn't come up quite as high. The butter itself, I didn't show you the butter itself. The butter itself, this isn't boiling yet, so letting it come up to temperature is no big deal. The butter itself does separate in the jars. So what you'll do is, as it's cooling, you're going to want to do this as it cools and hardens once it's canned. Right now it's in the can, but it's not canned until you run it at least an hour at 10 pounds. This Presto goes to 15 pounds. It doesn't seem to have an adjustment for 10 like this 16-quart Presto. 15 pounds is fine. And the 23-quart has a pressure gauge. You don't need the pressure gauge because you have your pressure weight. That's the Presto methodology, and that's why I'm decided to use the Presto canner, is because just to show you that you don't need to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on an All-American. You can get extra gaskets for your Presto if you want, but you don't need them. They don't really. If you're using it regularly, it doesn't really dry rot, so it kind of lasts for a long time. I've got some extras, of course, because I've got a lot of these Presto canners. Now, you don't put your weight on right away, okay? See, this is the weight that's going to go there, right? This isn't even boiling yet. What you're going to do is you're going to let your water boil, and then you're going to start to see steam coming out of here, and then it'll puff, 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 puff. When you get steady steam, it means that all your air from inside is gone, and the whole inside is filled with steam. And that's what you're looking for, because air compresses, steam doesn't compress. So now when you're up to pressure, this guy pops. You see, that's your lock for the handle. That's connected to this. You can't turn the handle anymore. Once that's popped up and you have a steady stream of steam coming out of here, then you drop your weight, okay? And you'll start counting your time from on the 23-quart when you have the dial from when it hits the 15 pounds, and with the 16-quart when you start to hear the steam escape out from under it, okay, whether you've got it set at 10 or 15 or whatever, when you start to hear the steam get out from under it, it doesn't necessarily have to do the tinka tinka tinka, especially Like you guys have seen me, some of you have seen me do canning on rocket stoves with much less heat sources, kerosene heaters. I've canned on for this column, done all kinds of that stuff over the years. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to do tinka, tinka, tinka. As long as you're hearing the steam escape from under it, you know that that weight is holding that much pressure in for that much orifice. So it's, if steam is coming out, you're at 15 pounds. Once I get the rolling boil like this and it's coming out from underneath, I usually just back off the heat a little bit so that it's not actually doing the hard tinka tinka, it's doing like a soft one. And that helps me again keep from boiling out. As you can hear, I'm running a second pot because when you're canning and when it's done, like I let this sit for 60 minutes at 15 pounds and cook, and then I turned it off, then I turn off the heat. When you turn off the heat, do not pull your weight, okay? You pull your weight only when the pressure is down. On a Presto, it's when this guy falls down, it falls back into the pot. On an All-American, you're gonna have a dial, so you're gonna be able to watch it go down when it gets to zero. Even when an All-American is at zero, you still should just let it sit for a while because it's still gonna have some residual pressure that is not gonna register on the dial. And why is that important? Because if this thing is still at 15 pounds or 10 pounds, even at 5 pounds, and you pull it off, the outside of the cans depressurize because the steam starts to come out, but the inside of the cans are still at 15 pounds. So you have to let the whole thing go back to regular sea level, whatever your pressure, your normal pressure is, before you release this pressure point, which holds in your pressure. And then you could take off your lid. And you see, it is still ripping hot, but it is not, the cans are not going to explode. If you're canning with glass, a lot of times the metal will survive it if you do that, but with glass what happens is, as I said before, your seal for your can is this, right? Is not your ring. Like, you actually reuse the rings when you're canning. You don't store your cans on the shelf with the ring on them. You store them like that. A lot of times people don't know this and they just keep buying the jars and they don't reuse the rings. But you do need to reuse your ring if you're gonna buy new tops to reuse your jars. Or if you're using Tattlers, Tattler lids, which I covered on Prepping 101. I'm probably gonna get back to all that stuff, but this is your can, all right? This is your thing, and you're gonna slide a knife, a butter knife under that when you want to eventually use this. And like I said, if you want to get the solids mixed up in it, then just as it cools, just keep shaking it. But if you do that, you're gonna see how it gets cloudy? See, it kind of looks like orange juice in there now. So if you just do that as it's cooling, you're probably going to end up with a better product when you go to use it down the road. Obviously, in my metal cans, I can't see what's going on in there, but I also, will do the same thing with them. And I had no errors. I had no errors in this run, so that's good. Especially, I haven't had a lot of wild success with glass. I'm just not a big fan of glass canning, and I just always seem to do something wrong usually. But this trip I didn't. So that's how you can butter. And if you're putting away a lot of flour, it's going to be an absolute luxury to have this. We'll see you next time.